All right, let's get started. My name's Abby Prieur. I work for Pheasants Forever as a farm bill biologist. I am presenting from my house today since we're doing this evening presentation. I work one-on-one with landowners to help guide them in establishing wildlife habitat and in particular pollinator habitat. So this fits very well with the work that I do. We also have Sandy Chenal. She is Pollinator Partnerships NRCS liaison for the state. And she is very well suited to the position because she used to work for the NRCS and recently retired. So she has a wealth of knowledge about a lot of the resources that we're going to cover tonight, as well as, that wildlife background. So she's a great resource to have on the call. And then we have Denise Natoli Brooks. She is an educator working for Central State University Extension, and she has a special focus on assisting historically underserved landowners who want to access some of the resources, again, that we're going to be talking about tonight. So again, she is comfortable and familiar working with people who may have never heard of the programs that we're going to mention and just don't know where to start. So we have some great people on to speak with you guys tonight to help answer questions. And we're going to throw a lot of information at you, but don't feel overwhelmed by it. We're happy to clarify and to talk more about things that may be confusing. So, just let us know at the end if there's something that you need more information about. So for those, probably since you've been able to join us, you might actually be familiar with using Teams. But if you're not, there's a couple key functions. The first is the chat function. So that is the speech bubble that's outlined with that red circle and labeled 1. If you click on that, you'll open up a sidebar that shows the chat, and you can type in questions or comments, and those will go out to the whole group, including the presenters. So we will be able to read and see your questions through the chat function if you don't want to turn on your mic and ask those verbally during the question and answer. The circle number 2, if you click on that, there is an option for viewing closed caption. So if you are hard of hearing or like to see the words that you are also hearing, feel free to use that. The specific wording on it is turn on live captions. And then the number 3 circle, that is the microphone. So you should all be on mute right now, just to kind of limit the background noise that we have while presenting. But when we get to the question and answer, if you want to talk with us, describe your scenario like the one person that came on was doing before we got started, that's fantastic, and feel free to use that function. So we're going to spend between 45 minutes and an hour sharing information with you. We're going to try to keep it moving so that we're not on here all night. I know it's, dinner time, Monday night. But what we're going to discuss is first just what is pollinator habitat, and then talk about what actions you can use to support pollinators on your land. Um, then Sandy will come on and talk to us about local opportunities. Some of those will be pollinator partnership opportunities, and some of them will just be local resources that are available in our state. And then we'll discuss federal programs, which are readily available to landowners and operators across the nation. And we see a lot of people taking advantage of these programs to develop wildlife habitat, including pollinator habitat. So it's a great thing to know a little bit about and try to decide if it might be right for you. And last but not least, we will have the Q&A discussion portion at the end of the program. So that's usually my favorite part. So, exercise your right to free speech and turn on that chat bar and let us know what you think is pollinator habitat. So type in your ideas there. Maybe you have specific plants that come to mind. You can describe a certain habitat type. You can try your hand at a definition if you like. But give us a feel for what you think pollinator habitat might be. Oh, fields of goldenrod. Great. So goldenrod is absolutely a great pollinator resource. It blooms, well, we have multiple species of goldenrod, so it depends on what sort of goldenrod you have in your field, and how often it blooms through the year, but that's definitely providing resources. Naomi says native plants that support the full life cycle of pollinators. Excellent, Naomi. That's what I was looking for. Um, so habitat is something that fulfills the needs of a wildlife species through its full life cycle, as Naomi said. So that absolutely includes food, and most people attach food resources to habitat when we talk about pollinators. So they just think flowers. And flowers definitely are a huge part of pollinator habitat, but there's quite a bit more to habitat. And that includes places for nesting, places for protection from predators, food throughout the entire season. And when we're talking about pollinators, we're usually talking about insects that have different forms in different life stages. So if you think about a butterfly that starts as an egg and then hatches and goes through this caterpillar stage and then crystallizes and then becomes an adult butterfly, those caterpillars, like the monarch butterfly caterpillar eats monarch or milkweed leaves. Those milkweed leaves are different than what the adult flying around butterfly eats, which is typically nectar. So a lot of times, even within a species, we have different foraging needs just depending on how old or what stage that insect is in. And then we broaden that out to the whole group of insect life that we have in Ohio, and we have a ton of species that have a lot of different needs. So I encourage you to think a little broader about habitat for pollinators and think about your land and try to identify what elements of habitat your land might already be providing pollinators, resources for pollinators. Maybe you don't have a wildflower field, but you might still be providing pollinator habitat. So to kind of go through some of the important elements, food might include nectar, leaves, pollen, even other insects. Nesting material might include dead wood of trees. That might be standing still as a snag, or it might be laying on the ground as just like a log in the woods. It might be hollow stems of shrubs, of grasses, or of dead herbaceous plants. Might be bare soil, sandy areas, cracks in your driveway or rocks, or clumps of native grasses. So again, maybe you don't have a wildflower field, but you might have a woodlot, and that woodlot might be providing foraging material in the form of leaves. It might be providing nesting material in the form of dead wood, and overwintering sites in the form of leaf litter on the forest floor. So maybe you have pollinator habitat. It's just not what you might think of initially when you think of that habitat type. So the point here is to just recognize what you have already and try to protect and enhance those areas with pollinators in mind. We don't necessarily need to go like clearing your woodlot so that you can create a wildflower field. You're kind of just, making different habitat types, but that's a lot of effort when your land is already providing pollinator habitat in the form of a forest. So just think a little broader sometimes and appreciate what you have. Now, with that being said, wildflower fields or pollinator fields, meadow habitat, are very popular right now, and that is for really good reason. Um, if you don't have a lot of habitat on your land and you're looking to add to the resources that you already have, these wildflower fields are great things to take on, great projects to try to attempt. And the reason for that is they do provide a lot of resources for bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, and other beneficial insects. So you're definitely going to attract those typical pollinator species. You're also going to attract other beneficial bugs that may not be thought of as pollinators, but may provide benefits like free pest control. If you're an organic farmer and trying to reduce pesticide use, you can bring in some of these pest predators like ladybugs, syrphid flies, and lacewings to help you with your pest control in your garden or your farm. And a lot of those critters are attracted to these pollinator fields. That's what brings them onto the property. Now, bugs are kind of at the bottom of the food chain. So anything that eats bugs or the plants that those bugs are attracted to are also going to come and use your pollinator habitat. So maybe you're a bird watcher or you're concerned about the, really rapid decline of grassland nesting birds like meadowlarks and grasshopper sparrows. Those birds are absolutely going to come and use those pollinator habitats. Maybe you're a hunter or like to just watch the turkey, deer, rabbits, and other upland game. These critters need grassland habitat to complete their life cycles, to feed their young, to keep their young safe from predators. So those are some other critters you might see using your pollinator habitat. And humans like to use pollinator habitat as well. They're really beautiful. They bloom all throughout the year and they change each year. So they're really fun to learn about and watch. And again, you get to take advantage of, looking at the bugs and the birds and the mammals that come to use those habitats. So if you're interested in the natural world, they are great things to have in your property and get to enjoy. The plants that are in pollinator habitat, they're also really great just for environmental benefits in general. Their root systems go very deep into the ground, up to 15 feet or more. And so if you think about how deep they're bringing water into the soil, how they're breaking up compaction in the soil, how they're preventing the quick movement of water across the ground, when we compare to something like a lawn or concrete. These pollinator habitats are good at filtering water and letting it slowly enter our waterways so that we have clean water in our streams and our lakes. Um, and they're great educational opportunities. Again, I mentioned the bird watching, but if you have kids or other people that you care about that like science or the natural world, they're wonderful places to just spend time and learn more about the world that you live in. Um, so they really can benefit people with a lot of different objectives. And it's definitely worth putting a wildflower field or plot or strip on your property if you don't have one already. So a lot of us that join programs like this, we kind of get it. Like, we're already into pollinator habitat. That's why we signed up to come here tonight. And the next question is, well, what do we do about it? How do we actually get these projects done? Because they do take time, money, and effort. And some people don't have, that suite of resources. So let's talk about what you actually do when you're ready to support pollinators on your land. What kind of projects do you take on? Where do you find the resources to get these projects done? So we'll kind of start broad view and kind of limit our scope from here. But this slide just kind of highlights some different ideas of what can be done on different pieces of your land. So maybe you own a large property and you have cropland and pasture land and just some land that you don't know what to do with. It's just kind of sitting idle. You mow it once in a while. Each pieces of that property can be altered or enhanced to support pollinators. So, we don't typically think of row crop agriculture as, really benefiting bees and butterflies and other insects, but there are things that can be done to enhance that habitat in different times of the year so that pollinators are supported. So you can consider, putting in a flowering cover crop between your commodity crops. You can alter your tillage or your pest management so that you're not, destroying insects that are in the soil or turning them up so that they're drying out or their eggs are drying out. Um, and then if you have pieces of land that aren't growing crops very well and you just kind of plant them because that's part of your routine, you can consider pulling those out of production and creating permanent habitat if that interests you. Um, On marginal lands or lands that you don't know what else to do with, we can look at conversion projects, bringing those from cool season grasses into native plants that support pollinators, even doing tree and shrub plantings. And then, of course, in our forest land, again, we can control invasive species that limit the diversity of plants growing that would otherwise benefit pollinators. We can create more sunlight in our forests. Oftentimes, our forests have completely closed canopy, and so we have mature trees and not much else. But what we want are some mature trees, some plants in the understory, and some plants growing along the ground, and all of those are going to flower at different times of the year, thereby supporting our pollinators. And then we can do things like creating deadwood, creating brush piles, that would be nesting and overwintering habitat for wildlife. So there's all sorts of stuff that you can do to support pollinators in addition to creating these pollinator fields. So hopefully, this gives you a little bit of idea of how you can maybe piece apart your property and maybe do a few projects that you think would be most beneficial for your land. These are just some pictures to kind of show you what these projects might look like. These photos here are focused on benefits on agricultural land, on row crop land. So we have some pictures of buffers, marginal lands, and wildflower strips where maybe areas that weren't productive were converted to permanent habitat. But then we have a photo of cover crops in the bottom left and hedgerows that would flower through part of the year and provide foraging resources for pollinators on land that is in production, which is pretty cool. And then we have photos of projects that can be done in land that's not being used otherwise or in woodlands. So the top left, this is more of like a native grass field. I kicked up a bunny in that field. That's like a true project field there. In the center photo, that's a proper wildlife or pollinator field. That's a CRP program project there, which we'll talk about the CRP program later on. And then we have a bottom left picture, which shows herbaceous plants in front of shrubs, in front of mature trees. So you have all those different habitat types stacked in together, and that's like wildlife heaven in my book. And then the two photos on the right are forest land practices. So we have a forest patch opening, and look at all that boneset and asters and goldenrod that was blooming there. Just because somebody decided to remove some trees, the pollinators are going to get 7 years out of benefit from that forest patch opening. And then we have some mid-story removal just to, again, open up sunlight to the forest floor so we get a little more diversity in our forests. And again, recognizing that most people are coming to webinars like this to hear about wildflower fields, I wanted to just talk in a little more detail about the process of creating a wildflower field from scratch. It's often more involved than people um, think in the beginning, so it's good to have a conversation about. That way you know what you're getting into. So typically we are starting from a lawn or an old pasture or some other area that's made up of non-native plants that aren't serving our pollinators or our wildlife very well. And the first step is usually to get rid of what is growing in that field now. And the reason for that is primarily because the wildflowers that we're trying to grow to create our pollinator habitat, they take 3 years to get established. In the first year, they're usually like this big. And the second year, they kind of spread out, but they're still, only about a foot high. And then in the third year, they start to bloom, they start to be competitive, they start to fill in. So if we plant these slow growing wildflowers into fescue without removing the fescue first, or into pasture without removing those non-native plants first, those non-native plants are just going to keep growing like they've always been growing, and those wildflower seeds are never going to get enough sunlight or be competitive enough to fill in and grow. So we're kind of trying to even the playing field here for these native plants that haven't been in that field previously. So that's kind of the reasoning behind why we do emphasize site prep so much and why we do it the way that we do it. So the typical approach is to mow and use herbicides to start removing the vegetation that is currently growing there that would be non-native. And we recommend doing that over multiple seasons. So it's kind of a repeated cycle across the span of about a year. So the site preparation does take some time and is not to be rushed because we're working towards really good quality habitat. There are other options for people who are wanting to do this organically. Oftentimes, those options are going to extend your timeline or they are going to reduce the size of your project. But if that's something that you want to, if you want to do this organically, I can absolutely talk to you more about those options. But the use of herbicides is what most people go with for large scale projects. Once your field is prepared, you will plant your seed. Most people will do this, well, all people will do this by broadcast seeding or using a native grass drill. Broadcasting is basically just spreading the seeds across the top of the soil surface, and that is best done as a dormant seeding. So doing that in the winter when the freeze and thaw cycle of the winter weather is going to draw those seeds down into the soil. If you're using a native grass drill, that again would happen across the dormant season or in the spring up to about June 1st. That's where we see the most success with these pollinator habitats. Once those plants start growing, even though you've done an awesome job at site prep, you are going to have some weeds. Mostly they're going to be annual weeds like foxtail, maybe a few biennial weeds like mare's tail, and these are easily addressed by doing a high mow a couple times in that first growing season. So kind of just getting in there, clipping the heads off the weeds so that they don't seed back in. And then we also have the added benefit of opening sunlight to those little bitty slow growing wildflowers that are kind of, hanging out just above this little surface. So we're just kind of baiting things along because these pollinator habitats take a lot of attention. They're very high, high maintenance in that first year. And then one thing to be aware of is, once you get things established, about end of year 2, things are going to start looking really good. But every couple of years, these habitats do need to be managed. You can't just set them and forget them because what's going to happen is Mother Nature in Ohio loves to grow trees. So if you just let the pollinator field go, don't do anything with it after that first year mowing, you're going to lose your pollinator habitat. So you want to get in there and create a disturbance every couple years. And that might involve, again, high mowing, haying, grazing in the right way, light disking, or prescribed burn. And those all have different effects, and we can absolutely talk about that when the time comes about which strategy might be right for you. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sandy to talk about resources.
Thanks, Abby. As Abby mentioned, I am working with Pollinator Partnership and recently retired from the NRCS. And I'm excited to be here because there's some really good opportunities and there's a lot of resources available to folks that are interested in doing either enhancing existing habitat or creating new habitat. And I'm hoping that we can help you see maybe the big picture of what might be available in order to do these things on your property. So sometimes, as someone who's doing some projects on my property, we find ourselves perhaps limited because maybe we have ground we rented out and we don't have big farm equipment, or maybe we just don't have all the tools necessary or the time because we're busy with other life obligations. So there are resources that are available to find people that do this kind of work. And I think Denise is going to put in the chat a link. You see this link here for the TSI OSAF directory. If you go just to the website without clicking on Find Vendor, and then once you're on that website, you click on Find Vendor, they actually have a database that you can search by county. So you can put in what county you live in Ohio. You can also put in a region like Northeast Ohio or Southwest Ohio. And that directory is going to list people that do that kind of work. It's going to list the services they provide. And it's also going to list their qualifications. So some of those qualifications could be they're a certified forester. They have a certification to do a prescribed burn for you. They might be a NRCS TSP, which you might wonder what that is. That's someone who has been vetted by the Natural Resources Conservation Service for certain activities, be that maybe a wildflower planting. They might be able to do what we call invasive species control. So all that kind of information is on there. I would suggest that you search by like Northeast Ohio, Southwest Ohio, instead of just your county the first time. Or if you do your county, like I only had 3 show up in my county, but when I did Northeast Ohio, there was quite a few more, and you can get a feel for the services. And I would also suggest you not search by services, even though it does offer that, because you're going to get more information and then you can narrow it down. Some other resources you might want to consider, let's say, Abby talked about, you need a native grass seeder, kind of like the picture there on the left. Local soil and water districts, several of them across the state, many of them, not all of them, they rent equipment. So maybe you have a mini tractor, but you don't have the no-till drill because you don't use it that often. You might be able to contact your local soil and water conservation district to see if they rent equipment, or if they have a list of people who might do custom work. Your local county extension agent from Ohio State or Central State may be able to give you a list of people who are custom operators in your area that might be able to do that as well. So talking with some of the local professionals and getting some resources such as this list here is really good. Also, some of the soil and water districts have what they call contractors list, and that might be on their local website. And that might be people that might do like clearing work, excavation type work. So if you are doing some larger projects where you're doing some of the forest work, you might, or you have drainage work to do along with that. They might have the list that has folks that do that kind of work, as well as perhaps wildlife planting. So check out those local resources. And if whatever county you're in, if you're in Cuyahoga County, just Google Cuyahoga County Soil and Water Conservation District, and you'll be able to find those resources. I work with the Pollinator Partnership now, and they have multiple programs and some phenomenal resources available. And I believe Denise is going to put in the chat their website, which is pollinator.org. And everything you see on this slide is downloadable stuff that they have on their website. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. The Monarch Wings Across Ohio, which is the large circle on the left there, they have a guide. They had a project in Ohio. It's created like a 23-page guide that has a lot of detail on the stuff that Abby covered on how do you create pollinator habitat? What species do you plant? How do you manage pollinator habitat? What's the maintenance requirements? Also, it just talks about maybe some processes that you can go through when you're planning what you want to do on your property, because you want to start with your goals and objectives. And it does a really good job, talking about all the things, you want to consider and how to go about it and what's required. So it's a really excellent guide. So especially if you're thinking about doing a pollinator field like Abby talked about, highly recommend that guide. Actually, I'm doing presentations, I'm teaching NRCS people, and I'm passing it out to the professionals. It's that good of a guide. Also on the website, you can sign up for their newsletters, and if you sign up for their newsletters, by email, you'll be able to access new programs. In fact, one of the new programs that they have is, just like Abby is available to come out one-on-one with you on your site to discuss your goals. They'll be hiring Pollinator Partnership. We'll be hiring someone that can do that as well. So that information will be, I'm sure, advertised in their newsletter. If you're a farmer that's producing a product, whether you're a beekeeper and you're selling honey, or you've got a small market that you're selling products, or even a traditional pasture operation and you're selling beef, there's a program that the Pollinator Partnership runs called Bee Friendly Farming, and it's a certification program, kind of like being certified organic. That's something many of us are familiar with. A Bee Friendly Farming certification has with it some criteria that requires that you have so much of your property as bee forage, and that you have forage throughout the bloom period, that you're using integrated pest management, which means if you spray, it's only because you've monitored your pest populations. You don't spray just to spray, and you do just what's needed at the minimal amount that's needed in the most environmentally conscious way you can. It also requires that you have nesting habitats, permanent nesting habitats, such as hedgerows. And then there's an application, and then if you get approved, they'll come out and they will certify your farm if it meets. And then you'll be able to use that Bee Friendly Farming logo on your products. And it's a really great marketing tool for you to use if you're selling products. Another project that is going on, they just closed the application period at the end of October, but it may be available in future years, is Project Wingspan. And this is a multi-state effort. Ohio is one of the states that's participating in this, and they had volunteer seed collectors collect native seed in Ohio, and then that seed is getting processed through a certified seed processor, and that seed is then getting shipped back to Ohio for pollinator plantings. Also, when you go to the website, a lot of they've got more than brochures. They have webinars on the website, and they have the webinars on the website to train the seed collectors. So if you want to learn more about what these plants look like, how to collect seeds, even if you have some on your own farm that you might want to move from, collect seeds from one location to another. They've got webinars on how to do seed collection. They have webinars on how to do pollinator plantings. So there's a lot of, and in this program, they actually did in-person webinars in September. We did one here in Ohio for folks that want to create pollinator habitat. So again, just want to get you back to their website. When I first got hired with them, I was blown away by all the stuff they have on their website. So I don't know, type in the chat, how many of you are old enough to remember ABBA? Or am I the only one here old enough that actually was around when they released their hits? Anybody? But let's talk about some money. See, nobody's been around long enough, I see in the chat. Oh, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. So there are multiple federal programs that provide funding. Thanks, Abby. One of our programs that we're only going to talk about the top two on this list, but the Other programs are going to be, your contact is going to be that conservation planner that you're meeting with on your property, and they can help steer you into programs. But kind of in a nutshell, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program is going to help you install practices. The Conservation Reserve Program is designed to retire and put in reserve cropland. So if you have commodity cropland, and then the Conservation Stewardship Program is kind of a reward program, whereas you've been doing all these good things all along, it kind of gives you points for and funding for the good things you've done, and then incentives to go even further. And then there's also other programs that are available that are very similar to EQIP, but come through different funding cycles. But your local USDA office are going to be able to help you see which one might be right for you. So let's start with the EQIP program, and it's called EQIP because it stands for Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The Environmental Quality Incentive Program is managed by the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS for short. The Natural Resources Conservation Service is the agency that has the technical expertise to do a lot of the conservation work that's done through USDA. So some programs are managed by NRCS and some programs are managed by other agencies. EQIP specifically is managed by NRCS. So let's talk a little bit about EQIP program. The benefit compared to some other programs that is a benefit of EQIP is that you can do it on any eligible land. Any land that is farmland, it could be marginal land, all those land uses that Abby talked about, woodlands, all of those land uses are eligible to receive EQIP funding. EQIP usually has shorter contracts. So these programs are government contracts. I know a lot of people think of them like grants, but they're really a federal contract between you and USDA, where USDA says, we will give you X amount of dollars per acre, for example, to do a pollinator seeding or a wildlife seeding. And then you also discuss and in part of your planning when you're going to do that. So there's deadlines, there's costs associated with those, and it is a contract. It also, a big thing with EQIP is a lot of those activities that Abby highlighted in the forest land, those activities in the cropland, those activities on the marginal or unused land that you might have, there's lots of different things that you can do on those different kinds of land uses. And therefore, since a lot of those land uses are eligible in EQIP, a lot of those activities are eligible for cost assistance. So EQIP is the largest buffet, if you want to think of it that way, to be able to pick and choose activities that are going to meet your goals for your property. And the key point with EQIP to keep in mind, and this is true with many, but not all programs, is they are competitive. And they're competitive based on environmental benefit. It's not competitive on whether you're a big farm or a little farm. It's competitive based on how many resource concerns are you addressing. A resource concern would be wildlife cover, wildlife food, wildlife continuity. Are you connecting habitats from one field to the next or one property to the next? Are you reducing erosion? You know, depending on what your project is, they're all going to have environmental benefits. So the more environmental, and then one project can have multiple environmental benefits. And the cost is based on a fixed rate, which means you're going to get paid per acre. The payment is based on a per acre basis. So let's say to do, and I don't quote me on this cost, but let's say to do a 1 acre of monarch butterfly habitat, the government may pay you, say, $800. Well, if you have to hire somebody out, and depending on who you hire, is just like hiring a painter for your house, you know, you can get somebody to do it cheap and somebody to do it expensive. You know, if it costs you $500 to do that, you're going to get paid $800. If it costs you $5,000 to do that, you're going to get paid that $800. So it's a fixed cost that you get paid. So, Margaret, in terms of how many, you know, the cost to hire people, it depends on what you're going to have them do. For example, if you're just going to have somebody, you know, do the seeding, that's, you know, they're going to probably charge you on a size type basis. But if you're going to hire someone like Davy Tree to come in, that's going to prep your site for a year, and they're going to do the seeding, and they're going to do spot treatment of weeds afterwards, you know, it's going to be a lot more expensive. You know, it can be a couple $1,000s, you know, per acre or higher. So it's like any other project, you're going to want to get cost estimates, and that's where having resources to maybe compare costs can help you. Another thing you can do too is think about, you know, how big of a project do you want to tackle? EQIP is the kind of program that you can apply for on, let's just say, I'm going to work on this one field, and I'm going to maybe plant a row of trees, and I'm going to do a, you know, half-acre pollinator plot, because that's something that I think I can handle by not hiring it out. That doesn't mean you can't come back next year and apply for the program again. So it's not like you only can apply once. The EQIP program, they take applications all year round until a cutoff, but you can have multiple contracts at the same time. Not too many people do, but you know, as you tail off into one contract, you can go into another. So it is something when you're talking with your planner to talk about, you know, how big of a project do you want to do based on your budget, based on your labor and all those resources that you need to complete that. And just as an example, like the seed costs for a monarch seeding is going to be more expensive than just a general seeding for pollinators, because it has a lot more milkweed species in that may be harder to come by. So seeding costs, whatever your seed mix is, you know, some people, you know, seed mixes can vary. And I know, Abby, you may know, like some of the Pheasants Forever, they sell seed, you know, those seed mixes can vary from $200-300 an acre to over $1,000 just for the seed. Let's talk a little bit about eligibility for the program. There's land eligibility and there's a producer eligibility. So in order to qualify for the program, you have to control the land. It doesn't mean you have to own it, but you have to control it. Maybe you have a lease on it. So if you're leasing land, or if maybe you're a beekeeper and you have beehives on a farmer's farm, you don't have control of that land unless you have a lease from them, and you would have to have permission from the owner to install a wildlife seeding. And that is just a simple handwritten note from the owner saying, I give you permission to do this wildlife planting. So you don't have to actually own all the land, but you do have to show the government that you do control the land. And they do have adjusted gross income limitations. This goes way back to several farm bills ago, where there was, you know, a big push that the government should be giving money to multi-million-dollar farming corporations. So that's one of the reasons that the Farm Bill has put adjusted gross income limits. An average of 3 years, you have to show that you have done less than $900,000 in adjusted gross income. And you think, oh, most people are like, oh, I'll never get there. But you know, if you're a landowner that sold off some farmland, or there was some kind of estate transfer, or if a business was sold, that might kick you out because that might show up in one of those 3 years. So that may just affect it. So it does happen on occasion. Wetland and highly erodible land has to be protected. The government doesn't want to be in the business of encouraging people to drain wetlands and to farm intensely in creating erosion. So there are provisions, and all these provisions have forms attached, but the role of your local field office is to help walk you through those forms. But to make sure that you haven't converted wetlands, and that if you have land that has the potential to erode because it's steep, that you have it protected because of your crop rotation. Maybe it's in pasture or grass, so it's not going to erode. So public land, like if you are a park district director, public land is not eligible for EQIP. If you are on city council and you've got a city park, the land has to be privately owned, and it has to be in an agricultural property or forest land. So what's that process look like? And the first step is really working with your local planner. And that local planner can be someone like Abby. It can be a local person from the Soil and Water District or the Natural Resources Conservation Service, to talk about what is it that you want to accomplish. You know, we can come out to a farm, the same farm, and we could make an infinite number of plans for that farm, and they would all be good plans. If you wanted to manage for white-tailed deer hunting and honeybees, your plan's going to look different than somebody who wants to manage for songbirds and rabbits. And you know, I had someone that I was out on that said, hey, I've got hunting dogs and I want to run my dogs and let go my rabbits and my foxes or whatever. And you know, that land's going to be different than someone who, you know, wants recreational land for the family, hunting property, or pollinator property. So it's not like some professional is going to come out and tell you what to do. They're going to try and help you see alternatives to meet whatever your goals are for your property. So you want to kind of have an idea of what you want to do in terms of your goals, as well as maybe the scope and budget of what you want to do as you meet with folks. So once you talk with a planner, then you're going to want to apply to the EQIP program. And the application is a 4-page application, and it takes 10 minutes to do, even over the phone. Part of that process is establishing your farm records with the USDA, and your local field office can help guide you on how to do that. Surprise, there's a form. And what that does is that'll assign a tract number to your property and a farm number, and those tract numbers and farm numbers actually then will be on your contract. All of the services of NRCS are free. The challenge is, Carrie, when you look at the deadline, which is underlined as being next week or 7 days from now, you're not going to get somebody to come out to look at your site before the deadline. That does not mean you can't apply. If you apply, you then will have a scheduled time for someone to come out to take a look at the property and talk with you. So you're going to talk with your planner about your goals and objectives, and then they're going to work with you on developing that plan before, and then that plan is actually what gets ranked. So if I come out to your farm and you want to do one tree planting on this half acre, and you want to do a half acre of wildlife planting, and maybe you want to do a little open area in your woodlot, those are 3 things that you're going to do. And then we'll talk about, well, we're going to start your site prep. What year do you want to do which practice first? So the schedule of the order of the things that you do, all of that's going to be discussed with you during that site visit. They'll probably do eligibility before they even come out. And the eligibility is, do you have control of the land? Do you own the land, or do you have a lease? Do you have permission? Filling out those forms under eligibility will probably be the first step that will happen after you make an application. And then if you are eligible, then they'll schedule that site visit. And then once that site visit's done and that plan is kind of hashed out, NRCS will rank that application. So this all takes time, and especially if you're coming in close to the deadline, you may be kind of in the dark until that site visit is done, in terms of what all you might be eligible to do or interested in doing. And so it may be a couple months from now before those site visits are done. So be prepared for maybe a cold January site visit or December site visit. And then you will get a notice by letter or email saying, hey, your application ranked high enough. Do you want to move forward with the contract? And that letter will say, hey, we estimate your cost assistance is at this many dollars. And then you communicate whether you want to move forward or not. And if you do, a contract will be developed and prepared for summer, probably signing in June or July. So what that means is, if you apply today, the earliest you're going to be able to even start doing anything is next fall. So if you're like gung-ho, I've got to do pollinators this spring, this program won't work for you because the government doesn't move that fast. But if you are really just starting this process, you can work with that NRCS person and try and get kind of a feel for what it is that you qualify, what it is that you want to do. If you really are just at the beginning phases, we take applications all year round. So you don't have to rush if you want to apply, if you're not sure you want to move forward. But if you've done enough homework that you know that you want to do this half-acre pollinator seeding in the next couple of years, usually these contracts are anywhere from 2 to 5 years in length. So if that time frame works for you, then you can start that process. Once you do those things in the contract, after they're planned, you're doing your herbicide treatment for your pollinator seeding, and you did it all next summer, then you let them know when you're done, and then they will come out and review that and try and certify it for payment. So all of these activities that we call practices, like wildlife planting or tree planting, those are practices. Those practices get paid for after you complete them, and they are inspected. Those practices are available online. The standards, so you have to complete everything by a standard. For example, the best time to plant trees is early spring, And you don't want to plant trees in July, especially the little seedlings, because it's a dry time and they tend to die. So if you would have to do your tree planting in that planting window date of, March through the end of April. So that, or end of May, I'm sorry, March or April. So you want to make sure that, you have any questions on those standards that you ask your local staff. So if you are interested, because the deadline is next week, you really want to call your local field office tomorrow. We also have, I think next Friday, or is it this Friday, we have a holiday in there. One of those Fridays is a holiday so those offices will be closed. So they can take an application over the phone, but you really want to talk to somebody about what it is you're thinking and start that conversation. And they can guide you every step of the process. And it sounds overwhelming and it sounds very bureaucratic, but it is a great program to provide some cost assistance for you to actually install these practices. And it also is an opportunity for you to have that free technical assistance, someone out there on your farm looking at things, how they're coming along, and giving you good advice on what to do to either improve existing habitat or create new habitat. And Abby makes a good point. There are the local soil and water conservation district, Pheasants Forever, Wild Turkey. There's a lot of partnership organizations that can provide that technical advice to you. And NRCS actually provides funding to help fund some of those positions that will actually help NRCS because of the workload issues. But the actual contract manager will probably be that NRCS person. That's who you'll be communicating with on eligibility and some of those deadlines for contracts. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Abby to talk about another program that can provide resources for landowners.
So it is worth just briefly reviewing this program because it is widely used in Ohio. It is more widely used in the western half of the state where we have, more intensive farming than we do in some of the eastern areas. But it is available throughout the nation and throughout the state to landowners who have cropland. So CRP stands for the Conservation Reserve Program. This program's been around a while and again is widely used, and it can be used to develop pollinator habitat. It is meant specifically to be applied to land with fairly modern cropping history. So, if the land has been farmed recently and farmed as row crop agriculture, it could potentially be eligible for CRP. Now, things that aren't eligible for CRP are things like your lawn or old pasture or, even hayland. So it's really meant to be applied to that, like corn and bean, row crop agriculture. But if a lot of people have that, and if you're looking to set aside some of those lands, whether it be an entire field or just a little corner or, a strip along trees that is not productive for you, this might be the program to look more closely at because it has some more financial benefits than EQIP does. There are two subsets of the CRP program, so you might hear about the general CRP sign up or the continuous CRP sign up. They're kind of under, the umbrella of CRP and can be used to do some of the same work, but they differ in a couple ways that aren't important for our discussion today. But be aware that depending on what fits best for you, it may be a competitive process or application process like EQIP, or you may just be able to enroll if you're eligible, which is pretty cool for some people. CRP also differs from EQIP in that it's a long-term contract. Contracts are going to last anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So by signing on the dotted line that you're enrolling in the program, you're going to set that land aside, put it into permanent cover, pollinator habitat or other for 10 to 15 years, and you kind of let it be for that time period. The financial incentives like EQIP include costs to help you establish the habitat. This can range anywhere from 50% of the cost up to the total cost to establish the habitat. And some people get up to that 100% coverage by achieving these incentive payments that are applied towards the rate to establish the habitat. But you are not going to make money off of establishing the habitat. The agency that administers this program, they will not pay more than 100% of your bill. So maxes out at 100%. In addition to getting financial assistance to establish the habitat, you will also receive an annual rental payment when you are enrolled into the program. And that's just kind of acknowledgement that you're not farming this land, and so you're not getting income from those acres that you otherwise may by attempting to farm it. And so, the program helps to offset some of that loss of income by delivering an annual rental payment for as long as you are contracted with the CRP program. And those rental payments differ based on your location and the type of soil and how productive that soil is. So it can vary widely depending on what land you are enrolling. So just some examples of how the pollinator habitat type or the meadowland type habitat can be developed under CRP. There are cover types that are specifically pollinator habitat. So establish a pollinator field, let's call it a pollinator field, and that's the end of it. But there's other ways to be creative for habitat cover types such as filter strips, habitat buffers for upland birds, tall grass prairie. So with any of these practices, and this goes for EQIP as well, you have to meet the minimum standard of the practice or the activity. So you can enroll a land into a habitat buffer for upland birds, and the minimum standard may be 2 types of native warm season grass. But if you want to go above and beyond the standard and add in some forbs or some wildflowers that are going to benefit pollinators, nobody's going to stop you. It's always good to clear it with the office, make sure everything's above board, but oftentimes we can be creative in how we apply these different cover types to get people what they want out of the habitat and also get enrolled into the program if it's the best fit. So there's a lot of detail that goes into the CRP program as there is for EQIP. But just for this stage of the conversation, know that it's out there, know that it's an option, know that it's applied to active cropland, and bring it up in conversation if you feel like it might be a good fit. And we can always talk to you more about the details of the program to see if it might be appropriate for your land or your operation. And with that, we're going to have Denise take control, deliver the last 2 slides about who you might be interacting with and the different roles of agencies in these federal programs.
Thanks, Abby. So we've talked about all these programs, and they are administered by the USDA, but there are 2 different agencies that you interact with when you participate in these programs. So we wanted to just take a moment to make sure we highlighted both agencies and encouraged you to develop relationships with both of them. So the Farm Service Agency, FSA, is a USDA agency. They're the place that your farm records are actually maintained and established. You'll be talking with them, and they are a very important part of your journey using the USDA programs. If you haven't established a relationship with them, take the time to do so and start that process. Like Sandy said, tomorrow The other government agency that we talked about a lot in USDA is NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. These are the ones, this is the office, the agency, and the professionals that you're going to talk to about what you want to do with your land, and they'll help you figure out which programs within EQIP, which activities fit best with your goal. They're going to help you as you get ready to put together that EQIP application that you have to file. But you do need to work with both agencies and develop those relationships, because each county's staffing is different. Their capacity to serve everybody is different. And just having the time to develop a relationship and continue to develop it over time and over the years is so, so helpful, because all these employees of the USDA, they want to help serve us and they want to help get conservation on the land. The more we can share with them on our own projects, the more successful that we're going to be. So take action. You're going to establish records. You're going to talk with both NRCS and FSA, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Farm Service Agency. There's lots of acronyms. So never hesitate to ask, what does that stand for? It takes time to catch up with all the acronyms that get thrown out. So always ask those questions. And those NRCS professionals, they will do that farm visit. It may not be tomorrow, but they will do that farm visit, and it's an incredible service at no cost. They learn about you, but you learn about what NRCS and our Farm Bill programs can provide as well. Keep in mind that the main program, EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, that we talked about tonight is competitive. It is competitive. That means that if you put an application in, it doesn't mean you're going to get funding necessarily this year, but you always have another chance, because this funding comes available every year. So we mentioned the EQIP deadline is in 1 week. If you've got everything together to apply this year, please do. We encourage you to. We're so excited to get more people involved in EQIP. But if the timing is not right for you this year, no worries. Use that time to get yourself organized and develop that relationship, so that when EQIP funding comes available again next year, you're going to jump right in and put forth a really competitive application. So there are next steps. There are action steps. We want to make sure that you consider all 4 of these action steps. They're not in any particular order. You decide the order that works for you, but you are ultimately developing a support network. And that support network includes the Farm Service Agency and the Natural Resource Conservation Service. It includes the Pheasant Forever Biologist. It includes Abby and her partners. It includes Pollinator Partnership, Sandy and her partners. It includes Division of Wildlife. It includes our extension services with Central State University and Ohio State University, and others that are out there to build that support system for you so you can best manage your land. You might have noticed that some of the farm resources put out by USDA talk about farmers and what they're doing for farmers. If you manage land, you're stewarding land, you're wanting to create that pollinator habitat, those programs are for you. So even if you don't call yourself a farmer, don't let the word farmer deter you. In terms of these programs, that's for you. You want to develop the pollinator habitat, these programs are for you, and we encourage you and support you in your journey to get there, because these are wonderful services that we do have. Do take a moment to see those next steps before we move on to the next slide, where Abby's going to actually wrap us up. I'm going to drop contact information in the chat for everybody, and then we'll have some time for questions. So Abby, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. You're so encouraging. I really love it. Yeah, so just to wrap up here, everyone who is on the call tonight, our information and supporting information is here on this question slide. So do reach out to us. My cell number is listed there, but it's a work cell, so don't be afraid to call and leave me a message. I'll get to you when I'm back on working hours. you can find more information about Sandy and Pollinator partnership using that QR code. The QR code next to my name leads to our Find a Biologist page for Pheasants Forever. So I do cover quite a large part of Ohio as a farm bill biologist, but we do have other farm bill biologists in the state. One of them's even on the call here tonight. So Timothy, she covers the northwest corner of Ohio. So you potentially might have a different farm bill biologist that serves your county. If you don't feel like looking that up, just contact me and I'll connect you with the right person. But do be aware that we have a network of biologists in the state, in addition to myself. And then again, if you want to find your service center, give them a call in the morning about these programs. If you'd like the QR code to find your service center through NRCS or FSA is there as well. And with that, I'd just like to thank everybody for sticking it out through the technical difficulties tonight and coming in to join us on this Monday evening. Hopefully you will take some information that's helpful to you or feel connected with some of us who might be able to help you and not be as shy to reach out in the future. But with that, we'll kind of sit quiet for a minute. Feel free to ask questions via the chat or use the reaction button to raise your virtual hand or unclick your mic to ask us questions.
And I also wanted to follow up on a couple of questions that I've been monitoring the chat with some information. We had a question earlier about finding soil and waters and NRCS in other states. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that that USDA Service Center locator we dropped in the chat, that went right to an Ohio resource, but it is for the entire nation. So if you own land in other states too, you can use that resource. It's great. Also, soil and waters, we have one in every county in Ohio, but there is actually a National Association for Conservation Districts. So again, if you're looking for resources in a neighboring state, perhaps, look at the National Association for Conservation Districts and they will help you find the resource wherever it is that you're looking for throughout the whole country.
A lot of our partners that we've mentioned here tonight, so Pheasants Forever, National Wild Turkey Foundation, Pollinator Partnership, these are all national organizations. And, you know, the level of support differs in every state, but there are definitely chances that some of these wildlife NGOs, we call them, are present in your state and might be worth a quick search. If you're looking for a habitat biologist. Department of Natural Resources or Department of Parks often has biologists on staff in states as well.
My main question was around maintenance. I have a 5-acre property that I devoted about 3 of those acres to wildflower meadow. Unfortunately, since I was just a homeowner, I didn't qualify for any of the programs, but I did use the Pheasant Forever seed, the CRP seed and the Monarch seed, and I kind of mixed a bunch of them together for my property. And so I'm going into year 3, and I'm noticing that the white aster is really kind of taking over. There's sections of it that it seems to have crowded out stuff. So I'm going to land prep certain sections and then reseed next winter. But other areas, you know, you talk about mowing, but I'm afraid to create too much thatch type things. And so then how do you manage that? And, you know, you hear things about prescribed burn, you hear things about other mowing methods and stuff. So I was just wondering you know, now that I've got it going, now what, I guess.
Yeah, great question. And that's on my books, is to do a next step or advanced strategies webinar in the coming year. So I'll have to send that to you, Naomi. and also it might be worth us having a conversation, Naomi, so feel free to reach out if you want more detail.
I
So
would love that.
great.
Yeah, definitely. Come on down. I'm in Hilliard, Ohio. Come on down.
Okay. Yep. Please reach out. Shoot me an email or shoot me a phone call sometime so we can set something up.
Okay, great.
So indicators that long-term maintenance is necessary is often a buildup of thatch, as you mentioned, a reduction in diversity. So perhaps native grasses are starting to take over if those were included in your seed mix. Or you're having a domination by one species such as the asters. So those might be indicators of maintenance needs. Always we are watching out for invasive species and spot treating those every year, typically in the fall as well. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, the Canada thistle is a real nice friend.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a great time to treat it. Right around this time in the next couple weeks as the natives start to go dormant. So we can talk about that too.
Great.
So strategies for maintenance depend on what the field needs. And oftentimes I tell landers that the field is going to determine what I'm going to recommend. Mowing and thatch is a concern. So that's one of the points of maintenance is to remove thatch. That's why we like prescribed burning. If you can hay or bag the clippings, bagging clippings on 3 acres probably is not an option, but if you can have it hayed and that debris removed, that might be an option. Or you might mow a part of it and then do a light disking, meaning like a 2-inch deep disc. So you're just kind of chopping stuff up and burying some of that thatch and exposing only about 50% of the soil surface. That could be a strategy. It just kind of depends on what equipment you have available, what's really going on in the field. You don't want to do soil disturbance if you have invasive species or if you have non-native cool season grasses in the field, because that can invigorate those. So it's good to take a look before we do any action, which is why I'd really like to talk to you. But that's kind of the general strategy, and some of the indicators that might tell you if field needs to be managed.
Okay, great. Yeah, I took a screen grab of your number and I will give you a buzz because I definitely I think I'm at the phase where I'm kind of like, do I need to do something? Do I not need to do something?
Yeah.
And I can't plug enough field prep. I know the other woman was talking about not wanting to use sprays and things like that, and I understand not wanting to do that. But if I had it to do over again, I would take a whole nother. I did it like in one season. I would take 2 seasons of land prep. It would really make a big difference. So can't say enough about land prep.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Naomi. And guys, this is like valuable stuff. If you know people who have done this before and can talk to them one-on-one as landowners, oh my gosh, that's so valuable. So thanks for your input, Naomi. You guys are the ones that do the work. You really know what's going on.
It's been a blast. I never thought I would buy. I was raised in New England, so I never thought I would buy farm equipment, and to help support my new hobby. My dad got me a subcompact tractor, so I went all out and all in, and yeah, so it's become a new labor of love.
That's awesome. Congrats on your success. That's really cool.
Thanks.
I see we have a question from Kate. Do you want to unmute, Kate?
Hi there. I have kind of a strange question. We just closed on some land that has just had the soybeans harvested on it. And I have an appointment with our soil and water conservation to come out in a few weeks. But I've been told that we should put a cover crop on it. And our plan for one of the fields is eventually to plant native fruit and nut trees and hopefully pollinator prairie on the other field. And I wanted to put down some sort of ground cover there, but I don't know what to plant now, whether we should just put a cover crop down to protect the soil, or whether we should just start with what we mean to go forward with.
So let me ask you for some additional information. So are you going to have it farmed again next year? And when are you hoping to seed it to the pollinator habitat or to the trees?
It will no longer be farmed.
Okay.
So we will start planting trees in the spring.
Okay. And what about the pollinator habitat or the native seeding?
So there are two fields. Sorry, I was kind of confusing. The other field we'll hope to plant as soon as possible with a pollinator habitat, but under the trees, I was hoping to plant something pollinator habitat as well, but what maybe something lower to the ground rather than something high growing, but I just don't know what to plant there. I've been trying to find information on what to plant under trees.
Yeah. So I'll give my 2 cents about what I've heard about that, and then maybe Sandy can chime in and say her approach. So what I've heard, so with trees, you want to, much like our slow growing pollinator plants, you don't want to create too much competition for them to grow.
Right.
So a full scale pollinator habitat may not be the best option there. You could do a clover ground cover crop and let it bloom, let it go to seed, and that's going to provide pollinator benefits. Oftentimes early in the season when we're missing a lot of food resources for pollinators, the clovers are going to bloom early. So that could be a good option. And I've heard of people using clover and a Virginia rye cover crop under trees to kind of hold back some of the weeds, provide a little benefit, but not provide too much competition for the trees. So that's what I would tell you to do. But again, that's more focused on the trees and the pollinators.
Yeah.
Sandy, do you have any ideas about that?
Well, just first off, this time of year, usually the seeding deadline for a fall cover crop is the end of October. You might get away. We've had warm weather, so the soil temperatures are warm. You may be able to broadcast cereal rye now. That would be the only thing that would grow now. And it would just basically sprout now and then come on in the spring. But then you're going to have to terminate that in the spring too. So, you could mow it or spray it, in the spring. I agree with Abby. I've seen some research that doing a Dutch white clover in an orchard type situation is good. It does help pollinators, and it's a low growing cover, so it tends to not compete as much with your trees. But clover does attract deer, and deer like newborn trees. So kind of it depends on your site. If you're in a high deer population, you are going to be encouraging deer with the clover, but clover does, there are different species of clover, and it does provide pollinator resources. It also provides nitrogen fixation for your nutrients in your soil. So I kind of tend to like clover because for landowners, it's really cheap seed too. And it's something that if you do need to terminate it, a regular 2,4-D is a pretty easy termination if you decide to maybe change that down the road. But if you want to do a fall cover now, I would think about, is your land sloping? Is erosion concern? There's not a lot of residue with soybeans. So if you do have some slope to your ground, a cover crop is nice. But realistically, this late in the year, even if you bought the seed and planted it tomorrow, it's supposed to turn cold next week. So you may get it to sprout, but you do have to terminate that. It's not like an oats cover crop or some of those that will just die over the winter and you don't have to worry about it. If we were talking a month and a half ago, I might have recommended something different, because that, had a lot more options in terms of your seeding times. The nice thing about rye, though, is it does provide that ground holding capacity. It's deeply rooted. My experience, if you have a bare field and you go into just trees, 5 years down the road, you're just going to have a really heavy weed infestation. It's going to be hard to control some of those noxious weeds. And you also have to look at what's around your farm. So if you have a soybean field right next to you and they have, like a mare's tail infection or something like that, where they've got some invasive species or hard to kill Roundup resistant type of species, then you're going to have that problem too. So you might also want to think about some sort of buffering if you do have your field next to another field, and whether that's just 10 or 15 feet of a some sort of a mix, vegetative mix, to help provide that buffer. Or your shrubs actually could, or your trees could aid in that buffer, could actually serve as that buffer in that case. But this late in the year, if the only option you really have to get anything to grow is cereal rye, if you don't have the means to terminate that in the spring, either by plowing it under or by herbicide, then you may just get away with not doing anything, because then just seed a mix in the spring when you do your tree planting, or start your pollinator prep in the spring.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And for this, just quickly, for the second field, that would be a pollinator habitat, would you just leave it until you go straight to seeding for the pollinator? That was also soybean.
If
I
it
would-
was harvested soybean this fall,
Yeah.
and it was a pretty clean field, not a lot of weed pressure in the field, you can seed it right away as a dormant seeding or a spring seeding in 2023.
Okay.
So farming, especially with Roundup Ready soybeans, is a great way to prepare sites for pollinator habitat. So once
Great.
those beans are harvested and chopped up, you can just do a dormant broadcast seeding, or a spring seeding. Hopefully with the spring seeding, get those seeds drilled.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hey guys, sorry, I had to get myself off mute. Abby, you are speaking our love language. We're part of the EQIP program right now. Kara McDowell put us in touch with you because we're kind of in this place where we're not very confident, but we just got our soybean field done, and I think we were communicating with you. We're at Mahalo Farm in Johnson Township.
Yeah.
So we owe you a call, and hopefully we can get you out to visit. But there's other areas. So EQIP, we have Pollinator, Wildlife, and Forestry. And by the way, anybody that's still on this call or listening, this is absolutely worth it, 100%. These guys are great resources. And just it's a great experience, but you do have to have patience because it takes a while to get here. So we've been working on this since we bought our farm in 2020. But there's other areas that we think would be amazing for pollinator, but we don't want it on the EQIP program necessarily. So I guess my question is, who can advise us on these other areas? Is it okay. So is that more of a site visit or?
Yeah. So, again, we should have stated this way earlier, but you don't have to enter a program to get advice from us. And that goes for the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, as well. So the advice is free and no strings attached. So yeah, if you have sites that you really want to do these projects, but the programs just don't feel like a good fit to you, or you want to kind of try the process on your own, see how it goes before you enter into a contract, that's totally fine. So yeah, get in touch with me. We can discuss those areas. And then when the time comes, I can complete a site visit and write up a plan for you guys to follow, whether or not that's in a program or not.
Awesome. We will be in touch. Thank you.
Right. Good to see you on the call.
I'm going to add to what you just said, Abby. The advice is free, so take it all, right? Like everybody's going to give you more information to help you make the plan that fits best for you. You don't have to just pick one organization, one person to do that site visit. If you've got all these resources, take advantage of them. And even when you get to the point of perhaps even looking at someone to hire to do the work, we've got that great resource that was shared earlier. Shop around there too. You don't just have one option. You have so many options. So take advantage of it.
Yep. That oftentimes people, like, I think, hesitate to speak with me because they think I'm going to be forcing them into a certain method, specifically around site preparation. You know, there's things that I think work best, but if that doesn't fit for you, we can talk about other options. Like, the end goal is the same. My goal is the same as your goal, and that's pollinator habitat and wildlife habitat. So I'm going to work on getting you there in the way that works best for you, because you're the one who has to do the work and spend the money. So I want to try to get you there. So don't be afraid of a little bit of banter, a little bit of discussion. We can figure that stuff out together. And a lot of people that are involved in this stuff are willing to have those discussions as well. Adam, Michelle.
I just wanted to add that to that point, the local farm service agency, we even called, talk about free advice. We have a 1 acre pond. And so they came out and tested our pond water, you know, and gave us advice about our pond for free. So just to back up what you're saying, it's an invaluable resource, and I think we're really fortunate to have it. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to make note that every county, every office, every staff member is different and has different expertise. So there may be certain things available in certain counties that aren't available in your county, or vice versa. But hopefully we can get you connected with the right people. But don't, have some patience. You might get passed around. You might need to have persistence and call people back if you haven't heard in a while. We kind of rely on you guys to let us know what you need and make sure everything's on track. So yeah, it's a process, but it's definitely like a community involvement type of thing. So, but just be aware that they might have a pond specialist in Michelle's county and they might not have it in your county. So be gentle when you're speaking with people. Because you never know. It does differ county by county.
Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat or hands raised right now. I think I can speak for Abby and Sandy when I say thank you for sticking with us this evening, and know that the conversation doesn't have to end here. We're all here for you. So keep talking.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Denise. And I think we will sign off on the call because coming up on 9 o'clock soon. So it's time for us to go enjoy some time off and think about what was shared here tonight. But please do reach out if you have additional questions. And I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you especially to Denise and Sandy for joining tonight and delivering such good information. Appreciate you guys. But yeah, thank you very much and have a great night.